Hello guys, this is Arvind here from Edureka and I welcome you all to this session on Waterfall versus Agile. So let us have a quick look at the pointers that we are going to cover today. We will start this discussion with the topic what exactly is Waterfall model, its pros and cons. Then we will talk about what exactly is Agile methodology and its respective pros and cons. And then we will actually compare them based upon a few parameters. And finally, we will talk about which methodology to use when and where. I hope I'm clear with the agenda, guys. Just a reminder, in case you have not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do subscribe and also click on the bell icon so that you're always updated about the latest videos from Edureka. So let's not waste any time and straight away begin with our first topic, what exactly is waterfall model? The waterfall model is a model of software development that is pretty straightforward and a linear one. This model is a sequential model that follows a top-down approach. This model has various phases, as you can see in this diagram, starting with requirement gathering and analysis. So this is the phase where you gather the requirements from the client for developing an application. And after you gather those requirements, you try to analyze those requirements. Next comes the design phase where you prepare a blueprint of the software. In this phase, you think about how the software is actually going to look like. So once the design is ready, you proceed further with the implementation phase where you begin with the coding for the application. The team of developers works together on the various components of the application. Once the application is developed, it is tested in the verification phase. There are various tests that are conducted on the application, such as integration testing, performance testing, stress testing, and so on. So after all the tests on the applications are done, it is deployed live onto the production servers. At last comes the maintenance phase. In this phase, the application is monitored for performance. Any issues related to the performance of the application are resolved in this phase. So this was waterfall model in a nutshell. So now let us talk about the pros of the waterfall model. By having clear goals and directions, planning and designing becomes more straightforward and simple. As such, the whole team ideally remains on the same page for every phase. You can easily measure progress and you know when to move on to the next step. There are clear milestones and the phases indicate how well the overall project is going on. This methodology saves time and money. Through clear documentation and planning, your whole team is more prepared and wastes no time in future. So these were the pros. Now let us talk about the cons. Gathering and documenting your requirements on each step of the way can be time consuming as well as difficult. It's hard to assume things about your product so early into the project. As a result of this, your assumptions might be flawed and different from what customer might expect. If the above is indeed the case and your customers are dissatisfied with the delivered product, adding changes to the product can be expensive, costly, and most of all difficult to implement. In general, the risk is higher with the waterfall approach because the scope for mistakes is high as well. So if things go wrong, fixing them can be hard as you have to go a couple of steps back. So now let us talk about the Agile model. So Agile is an iterative-based software development approach where software is broken down into various iterations or sprints. Every iteration has phases like the waterfall model, such as requirements gathering, design, development, testing, and maintenance. So the duration of each iteration is generally 2 to 8 weeks. So in Agile, you release the application for the first time with some high priority features in the first iteration. After its release, the end users or the customers give you the feedback about the performance of the application. The necessary changes are made into the application along with some new features, and the application is again released, which is the second iteration. So this entire procedure is repeated until the desired software quality is achieved. So let us discuss the pros and cons of the Agile model. Because of high customer involvement, you receive feedback quickly and make decisions on the fly. There's more frequent communication, more feedback, and a closer relationship with your customers. There is a lesser risk here since your work output is reviewed at every stage. You also save money and time from unnecessary expenditures because you'll be prioritizing providing value for your users. You'll be improving the quality of your output with each cycle. By breaking down your project into bite-sized pieces, you can learn from each iteration. There is a lot of trial and error involved, but for most of the part, you are still focusing on high-quality development, testing, and collaboration. Now let us talk about the cons. For the approach to work, all members of the team must be completely dedicated to the project. Everyone must be involved equally if you want the whole team to learn and do better on the next run. Because Agile focuses on quick delivery, there might be an issue with hitting deadlines. This approach may seem simple, but it is hard to execute. It requires commitment and for everyone to be on the same page, ideally in the same physical space. Documentation can be ignored. Because Agile methodology focuses on working software over comprehensive documentation, things might get lost through each stage and iteration. As a result, the final product can feel different from what was planned initially. So these were a few pros and cons of the Agile model. Now let us have a look at the real-time example where we will cover both these models. So some company named XYZ is working on a project to come up with a competing product from MS Word that provides all the features provided by MS Word as well as some other features as requested by the marketing team. So here the final product needs to be ready in approximately 10 months of time. So now let us see how this project is executed in the waterfall model first and then the agile model. So in traditional waterfall model, say for example at high level, the project teams would spend 15% of their time on gathering requirements and analysis. So since the duration of this project is 10 months, so 15% of the time roughly accounts to 1.5 months. 20% of their time will be spent on design, so that is roughly 2 months. 40% of the time on coding and unit testing, that is 4 months. 20% of the time on systems and integration testing, that is 2 months. And at the end of this cycle, the project may also have 2 weeks of user acceptance testing by marketing teams. So in this approach, the customer does not get to see the end product until the end of the project, and here it becomes too late to make any significant changes into the product. So as you can see in this diagram, what we have just discussed, and this diagram I hope will give you a more clearer picture. And now let us see how things work in the agile approach. So in the agile approach, the project will be broken down into 10 releases. So let us assume that each iteration is set to last for 4 weeks. So rather than spending 1.5 months on requirement gathering in agile, the team will decide the basic core features that are required in the product and decide which of these features can be developed in the first iteration. Any remaining features that cannot be delivered in the first iteration will be taken up in the next iteration or subsequent iterations based upon priority. So at the end of the first iteration, the team will deliver a working software with the features that were finalized for that iteration. So in all, there will be 10 iterations, and at the end of each iteration, the customer is delivered a working software that is incrementally enhanced and updated with features that were shortlisted for that iteration. So as far as agile methodology is concerned, in every month we have all these phases like the requirements gathering, analysis, design, coding, testing, user acceptance, learnings, and so on. So this cycle will repeat for 10 months. Since in our case, the duration of project is 10 months. So this approach allows the customer to interact and work with the functioning software at the end of each iteration and provide feedback on it. This approach allows team to take up changes more easily and make course correction if needed. So in agile approach, the software is developed and released incrementally in iterations. I hope guys you have understood this example and this would have given you a more clear understanding of both the models. Now let us compare both these models based upon a few parameters. So in this comparison, first we will talk about the parameter and then we will talk about how that parameter is defined in the waterfall model and in the agile model. So the first parameter that we will discuss is the scope. So here change is conducive as it is inevitable. But you must also keep in mind that change comes at the expense of cost, effort, and time. So waterfall works well when the scope is defined and waterfall doesn't support any changes. Whereas agile is suitable for projects with an unknown scope. Agile advocates and facilitates change. The second parameter is the customer input. So customer involvement is beneficial for both the models since the more customer is involved at every stage, the lesser risk is involved in developing the application. So waterfall supports customer interaction at major milestone stages only, whereas agile encourages customer feedback at all points during product development. The third parameter is the team. So collaborative effort results in greater productivity. Contracts of varying nature assigned to various vendors fail to work well under high team synchronization. So in waterfall, there is no requirement of continuous team collaboration. Here the more emphasis is on independent performance, whereas agile encourages synchronized teamwork at all stages of product development. Agile requires teams to have skills. The fourth and the final parameter is the cost. So fixed budget is good for small businesses. Likewise, fixed budget can also cause a disturbance if necessary changes arise at some point in time. So as far as waterfall is concerned, budget is fixed at the start, and this includes backup plans for the identified risks. Whereas in agile, budget is not defined just like the scope, and it is likely to become expensive when unforeseen changes and risks occur. So this was a comparison of the waterfall model and the agile model. So now the final point, which model to use when and where. In my opinion, you should use waterfall model if you satisfy the following conditions. You know that there will be no change in the scope and your work involves fixed price contracts. The project is relatively simple and you have done it many times before. You know very well that the requirements are static. Customers know exactly what they want in advance. And when you know that you're working with orderly and predictable projects. Also, you should use Agile under following conditions. There is no clear definition of the final product. The clients or the stakeholders are capable enough to modify the scope of the project. You anticipate any kind of changes during the project, and you should use Agile when rapid deployment is the goal. So, guys, you must be wondering which one is better, Agile or Waterfall. So, let me tell you, there is no clear winner here. So, it totally depends on the project and the level of clarity that surrounds the requirement. You can say that Waterfall is a better model if you have a clear picture of the final product. Also, if you know that the requirements will not change and the project is relatively simple, then Waterfall model is definitely for you. This model is a straightforward, efficient process if you don't expect to deal with any sort of changes. Whereas Agile is superior when you don't have a clear picture of the final product, when you anticipate changes at any stage of the project, and when you know that the project is pretty complex. Agile can accommodate new evolving requirements at any time during the project, whereas it is not possible for Waterfall to go back to a completed phase and make changes. So I hope I've answered your query about which model to use when and where. So guys, this brings us to the end of this discussion on Waterfall versus Agile. I hope you have enjoyed this session. If you have any queries related to this session, you can post them in the comments box below and we will try to get back to you as early as possible. Thank you so much.
I hope you have enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!